Chief Justice John Roberts entered the hearing room with the air of someone who'd seen it all until Jasmine Crockett turned his own statements against him, leaving the room in stunned silence. There was a stillness in room 20,141 of the Rayburn House Office building, not the calm kind, but the heavy silence that comes just before something cuts through the tension. On the surface, it looked like just another routine hearing, but everyone present could sense that something different was coming. Seated at the witness table, Chief Justice Roberts wore a navy suit that looked like it cost more than a month's wages for many in the room. He appeared calm, composed, even confidently detached. This wasn't unfamiliar territory for him. He had testified before Congress multiple times and understood how to navigate the process, speak just enough, manage the pace, and stay above the controversy, but this hearing wasn't about abstract legal theories. This time, the subject was far more personal and far more uncomfortable. Judicial ethics. Public scrutiny had intensified. Questions about impartiality, undisclosed gifts, and questionable associations were piling up, issues that couldn't be ignored or dismissed. The cameras were rolling. The public was watching. And for once, the protective veil of the judicial robe wasn't there. One by one, committee members took their turn. Some asked gentle questions. Others walked a fine line, aiming to be firm without sounding hostile. Then, her name was called. Representative Jasmine Crockett of Texas. She adjusted the microphone, leaned in slightly. Her voice didn't rise because it didn't need to. Her tone commanded the room. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman." Some in the room weren't paying much attention at first. They knew of her, a former public defender, relatively new to Congress, sharp during debates and never one to sugarcoat, but this wasn't a floor debate. She now sat across from the highest-ranking judicial figure in the country. You could sense it. People were silently placing bets on how long she could maintain control. Justice Roberts remained still. He offered her a smile, the kind only practiced. Power can deliver. A blend of tolerance and performance, as if entertaining a clever question from a promising student. But Crockett wasn't there to impress. She was there to hold him to account. "Chief Justice," she began, "you've previously stated that the court adheres to a strict ethical code, even without a formal code in place. Is that correct?" Roberts clasped his hands, voice steady. "That is correct, Congresswoman. The members of the court follow long-standing principles that have traditionally guided judicial conduct." She nodded, flipping to another page in her folder. "Help me understand something then. If that's the case, why wasn't there any disclosure about the relationship between Justice Merritt and a political donor whose case came before the court just last year?" That got attention. Cameras clicked. A few heads turned in the room. This time, Roberts didn't smile. He made a subtle adjustment to his tie. "I'm not in a position to comment on ongoing ethics reviews or individual justices." "Right," Crockett said, glancing down briefly before meeting his eyes again. "But you can speak on precedent, correct?" "Yes, good," she continued. "Because based on my understanding, and correct me if I'm mistaken, the Supreme Court has long used the appearance of impropriety as a critical standard. It's not only about whether something is legally wrong, but also whether it seems wrong to the public." Roberts shifted slightly in his seat. "The appearance standard has been a guiding principle for many institutions, yes." Crockett didn't pause. "Then wouldn't failing to disclose a close connection with someone who financially benefits from a court decision seem improper?" She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. The room was already still. Roberts remained composed, but the tone had shifted. He answered with care. "Congresswoman, I think we're veering into hypotheticals." "I'm not," she replied. "I'm citing facts, pulled directly from your court's financial disclosures." But the most intense moment hadn't arrived yet. That was still on its way. Roberts straightened, one hand resting calmly on the polished wood table. His practiced eyes scanned Crockett's face. She didn't flinch. Her voice was clear, measured. "I'm quoting from the official disclosure forms, Chief Justice," she said again, this time slower, as if daring him to challenge her source. He cleared his throat. "Those forms are compiled by the court's administrative office, and I trust The process is carried out with diligence. But do you review them personally? She asked, tilting her head slightly. Do you make sure what's submitted is accurate and complete? There was only a brief pause, but it said enough. There is a process in place, he responded. Each justice is responsible for their own disclosures. Crockett leaned back slightly. She didn't smile, this wasn't that kind of moment. Instead, she let the silence stretch. Interesting, she said. Because where I come from, if you're in charge of policing yourself, that's not accountability, that's just grading your own test. A few people in the gallery exchanged quiet glances. One staffer let out a short, disbelieving breath, half laugh, half shock. Roberts tried to steer things back. Respectfully, Congresswoman, the judiciary was designed to operate independently of both the legislative and executive branches. Our duty is to interpret the law, not respond to political pressures. And no one here is asking you to do that, Crockett replied. We're not telling you how to rule, we're trying to understand why certain patterns keep emerging and why they're never addressed. Roberts began to speak, but she raised a hand not to interrupt, but to set the stage for her next point. I've spent years in criminal courts across Texas, she said, watching judges lecture young men, black, brown, white. It didn't matter about taking responsibility, about how even the appearance of dishonesty could ruin their lives. So forgive me if I have a hard time believing the highest court in the country shouldn't be held to that same basic standard. Roberts shifted again slightly. Congresswoman, I understand where you're coming from. And we have always treated concerns seriously, responding with internal reviews and integrity. You have no binding code, Crockett interjected. And the only oversight is internal, a beat. That's like asking a fox to file a security report on the henhouse. This time, there was a quiet murmur at the back of the room. Cameras clicked faster. Reporters leaned forward. She wasn't putting on a show. She was holding him accountable. Roberts inhaled deeply through his nose, his fingers tightening around the edge of the table. Still composed, but now with the air of someone who understood he was walking on thinner ice than expected. The court is not above criticism, he said. But I'd like to remind the Congresswoman that neutral respect between co-equal branches of government is vital. Crockett glanced downward, then back up, a faint flicker of irritation crossing her face. It wasn't because she was losing, but because she recognized that the word respect was being used as a shield. I do respect the court, she said. I respect what it's meant to represent, but respect without truth is just for show. The people who sent me here didn't elect me to admire your robe. They sent me to ask why the rules seem to shift depending on who's wearing it. Roberts looked at her again, this time longer. The change in his expression was subtle, but it marked a shift. He was no longer seeing a first-term Congresswoman. He saw someone who came dismantled the legal niceties might try to hide behind, and she was just getting started. What came next wasn't a rhetorical jab. It was something more precise. The next document in Jasmine Crockett's folder looked unremarkable thin. Just a few stapled pages, but it carried weight. Not the kind you hear when dropped, but the kind that makes people fall silent. She slid a single page onto the desk and adjusted her microphone. Chief Justice, are you familiar with Dalton v. Mason County, a Fifth Circuit case from 2009? Roberts squinted, not confused, but calculating. Somewhat. That was a procedural decision on judicial recusal, if I recall correctly. You do, Crockett replied. It centered on a judge who didn't step aside despite indirect financial. Tisto, a law firm involved in the case. The ruling made it clear even the appearance of bias was enough to warrant recusal. She tapped the corner of the page. And yet, just last year, Justice Harlan took part in Macon v. Delta Rayla case where his close friend and financial supporter stood to benefit directly from the ruling. Roberts didn't reply at once. Crockett leaned in slightly. No recusal. No explanation. No transparency. And the decision passed 5-4. This wasn't just a public critique. It was a precise incision into the soft underbelly of the court's credibility. Roberts let out a slow breath. Congresswoman, I'm not here to re-argue specific cases. I'm not asking you to, she responded, I'm asking how a court founded on fairness expects the American people to maintain trust when its rulings increasingly resemble private arrangements instead of impartial judgments. A few audible reactions followed, quiet but real. A staffer's pen clattered to the floor. Roberts leaned closer to his mic. Your remarks are inflammatory. And your silence, Crockett said evenly, has been even worse. She didn't rush. She allowed each sentence to land before moving on. There's a woman named Carla Jennings in my district, a single mother who worked night shift, sat a hospital for 2 decades. Her son was denied financial aid because of a paperwork error that made it seem like she owed back taxes. She appealed, took it all the way to federal court, and what was the response? Tough luck. She looked directly at Roberts. But a billionaire with personal ties to a sitting justice can get their case heard, argued, and decided in under 4 months with a favorable outcome. Roberts's eyes narrowed, his hands clasping a little too tightly now. He hadn't anticipated this level of preparation, certainly not from her. The court, he began, has limited capacity and must make difficult choice about which cases to accept. That does not equate to favoritism. But public perception matters, doesn't it? She asked. He didn't answer. She asked again, more pointedly. Chief Justice, does perception matter? He gave a quiet nod. Of course. Crockett's voice lowered slightly. Then I suggest you start paying attention to what the public is seeing, because right now, they're not seeing justice. They're seeing a system protecting its own. For the first time, Roberts had nothing to add. The room was silent. Even the committee chair stayed quiet now. One wanted to cut in. What had started to feel like a historic moment was quietly building. Crockett wasn't raising her voice. Calmly turned another page. I came here today with respect, she began. But I also came with facts. And the facts show your institution has a serious problem. One that runs deep, and it's time to stop pretending that's not true. But the real shift hadn't happened yet, not until Chief Justice Roberts realized exactly who was sitting across from him. There was a subtle change in his tone, something everyone in the room picked up on. He leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped, an effort to stay composed, but the rhythm of his voice had changed. It was less controlled now. Less sure, Congresswoman, he said. While I respect your passion, I'd advise against forming conclusions based on isolated cases, without fully understanding how the judicial system works. Crockett didn't flinch. With all due respect, Chief Justice, I'm not jumping to conclusions. I'm connecting the dots and that matters. She could feel the shift in the room. People weren't watching Roberts anymore. They were focused on her. That's when she made her move. In 2013, she said, holding up a document, you gave a commencement address at Harvard Law. You told graduates, and I quote, your credibility is your currency. You said once people stop trusting your integrity, everything falls apart. Roberts leaned back. That's correct, he replied. Then tell me. She continued, her tone sharpening. How does credibility survive when public trust in your court is at its lowest point in decades? When polls show more Americans believe this court is driven by politics, not principles? He didn't answer right away. So she pushed on. You can't spend 2 decades building a reputation and then act surprised when silence around your colleague starts to crack open that image. Roberts opened his mouth, but Crockett didn't pause. You called this passion. It's not. It's precision. I'm not yelling. I'm not guessing. I'm asking why people like Carla Jennings are held to strict standards your justices can ignore right in front of us. Her voice dropped, calmer but firmer. Do you know what it feels like to walk into a courtroom, Milady, knowing the odds are stacked against you? I do. I've seen young men cry after sentencing because they knew they never had a fair chance, because justice wasn't about truth, it was about who had the resources, the connections, the time. The room went still. No keyboard clicks. No whispers. Just Crockett's voice cutting through the silence like glass breaking. Roberts tried to respond. The court has taken steps, she interrupted. Not enough. Not when billionaires fly justices to luxury resorts, and no one questions it. Not when decisions affecting millions are matted behind doors the public can't knock on. Then she said the line that hit hardest. You were right about one thing, credibility is currency. And right now, your institution is overdrawn. That line landed like a punch. A law clerk in the back scribbled it down so fast the pen nearly tore the paper. For the first time, Roberts didn't reach for a reply. He just sat there. Crockett let the silence linger 2 long beats before leaning back in her chair. She wasn't showing off. She wasn't performing. She was doing what no one else had, calling out the court's power for what it had become: protected, selective, untouchable. Roberts adjusted his tie again, but this time it looked more like a nervous habit than a show of control. The committee chair cleared his throat, ready to move on, but even he paused. Maybe it was out of respect. Maybe he just didn't know how to follow what had just happened. But Crockett wasn't done. Not yet. She wasn't just there to challenge the Supreme Court. She came for something. More, something real for the people watching at home, people who didn't know the names of landmark case but felt the weight of their outcomes every single day. She paused, then shifted her tone slower, more personal now, less courtroom, more kitchen table. "There's a man in Odessa," she said. "His name is Jorge Salgado. He's a truck driver, worked through the pandemic without missing a single day. Never complained. But when his brother was detained in a private immigration facility and denied medical treatment, Jorge filed a petition. The court refused to hear it, didn't even consider the facts." She looked at Roberts. He couldn't understand why. So I told him. Because the law was written that way, because the system is built to hide injustice behind legal language as to protect those in power. She leaned in. "And your court, the highest in the land, had a chance to change that, but you chose not to listen." Roberts remained silent. Crockett continued. "These aren't just hypotheticals, Chief Justice. These are real people who still have faith in the law, even when it fails them. People who believe that if they work hard, follow the rules, someone in power will care enough to listen." She turned, now addressing the entire room, not just Roberts. "We have to ask ourselves, what happens when they stop believing? When they lose faith that justice is possible unless you own a business, fund a campaign, or sit on a board?" There was a rawness in her voice, not anger, not performance, just sincerity. She paused before continuing. "I became a lawyer because I believed the law could create fairness. I stayed a lawyer because I realized the law is only as just as the people who uphold it. And right now, I'm facing someone who holds more power than most ever will, but refuses to acknowledge. That unchecked power is dangerous." Roberts finally spoke, though his voice lacked its usual firmness. "Congresswoman, I don't deny that some rulings come with difficult consequences. But the court's duty is to interpret the law as it's written, not to act as a savior." Crockett nodded. "And what if the law is written to benefit the few? What if it's interpreted to protect those already at the top?" She didn't need an answer. She knew she wouldn't get one. "You talk about judicial independence," she said. "But independence without accountability isn't strength. It's isolation," someone whispered from the back. "She's right." Quietly, not for drama, just a voice giving shape to the room's silence. Crockett turned over one final paper. "This isn't just about politics. It's about principle. It's about telling people like Jorge and Carla that their lives still count. That their stories don't end the moment they walk out of your courtroom." She looked around the chamber. "Because if this court won't hold itself accountable, then it's up to us, the people, to start demanding answers. Louder, tougher." The camera tightened on Roberts's face. His lips pressed into a flat line. No smile, no mask. Just stillness. She looked at him once more. "I didn't come here to shame you. I came to remind you that justice isn't about positions or traditions. It's about the belief that someone in power still cares." But she hadn't come just to speak. She had a message, and it would stay with them. The silence that followed didn't need permission. It simply settled in. Reporters paused. Staffers stopped pretending to flip through papers. Even the committee members who had barely looked up earlier were now fully focused on Crockett. Something had shifted. Roberts felt it too. He sat upright, but his tone had softened. The old strategy, measured speech, legal phrasing, professional detachment wasn't enough, not this time. Not with her. Crockett gently closed her folder and placed her hands on the table. Her voice, when she spoke again, was calm and thoughtful. "Growing up in St. Louis, We had this old judge, a white man, retired military, tough as stone. But he used to say something that stuck with me. A courtroom is only as honest as the people brave enough to challenge it. She glanced at Roberts. I think about that a lot lately. No applause, no theatrics. Just wait, her words. Etched into the air. Roberts adjusted in his chair but said nothing. His confidence hadn't vanished. It had simply been met by someone who didn't treat it as untouchable. Across the room, Representative Leonard Franks, a soft-spoken veteran from Arizona, leaned into his mic. Damn. It wasn't policy, it wasn't debate. It was respect. Crockett didn't react. She wasn't here for that. Chairman Bledsoe finally spoke, his tone more deliberate than usual. The committee thanks Representative Crockett for her line of questioning. Even he seemed hesitant, like moving on too quickly would break something fragile. Roberts reached for his water. His hand shook barely, but enough, Crockett noticed. She met his eyes. You don't have to agree with me, Chief Justice. But you heard me, that's all I needed. There was no bitterness in her tone, no triumph. Just something harder to dismiss. The truth, spoken plainly, one by one. Others began to ask their questions, but the atmosphere had changed. The tone of the questions had shifted, less performative now, more direct. No one wanted to follow her, yet they had no choice. And no one wanted to seem like they were cleaning up the aftermath of what she had just delivered. Even Roberts responded differently. His answers were shorter, less abstract. His tone was sharper, the charm he once carried noticeably subdued. He wasn't defensive, just aware. Outside the hearing room, the event was already trending. Clips of Crockett's exchange were circulating rapidly across social media. People who usually ignored Supreme Court hearings were now watching congressional clips during their lunch break at cafes near Capitol Hill. A barista even paused mid-order to replay one of Crockett's lines. In a classroom in Dallas, a young black girl turned to her teacher and asked, "Is she a lawyer?" And in households across the country, among people who had long lost faith in the system, there was a sudden flicker of something rare, representation that didn't feel like compromise. Inside room 2141, Roberts finally glanced at Crockett again, just briefly, but this time the look was different. No superiority. Just recognition, not of defeat but of understanding. She wasn't just an up-and-comer, she wasn't the future. She was the present, even as the room regained its usual rhythm. She had one final thing to say, because this wasn't just about procedure or principle. It was about legacy. Outwardly, things looked normal again. But anyone truly paying attention could sense the shift. What started as just another choreographed hearing had become something else, etched into memory by a moment that couldn't be ignored. Jasmine Crockett wasn't speaking anymore, but her presence still filled the space. Her words lingered like an unwritten law. She had done more than challenge a Supreme Court justice. She had made the system pause. As the hearing moved forward and other representatives began their turns, Crockett sat silently. No expressions, no whispered remarks, just calm awareness. She knew what had happened. She didn't need to repeat it. Roughly 30 minutes later, Chairman Bledsoe called a short recess. Members stretched, staffers rose, and a few journalists rushed out to meet their deadlines. Roberts stood too. But before he turned away from the table, he looked back. Crockett hadn't moved. "Congresswoman," he said, his voice noticeably softer, "your district is fortunate to have you." She met his eyes. "I know." He nodded, not formally, but more sincerely, and walked away. He no longer looked unsettled. Just quieter. As the room emptied, a young woman from the gallery, a law student from Missouri, her blazer a size too big, approached Crockett hesitantly. "I just wanted to say," she began, "I didn't think anyone ever talked to them like that." "Not for real." Crockett stood, adjusting her sleeves. "Talk to them like what?" she asked. "Like they're not above you." The student replied. Crockett gave a small smile. "Not for show, just enough. They're not." And with that, she picked up her notes and exited the hearing room without another word. That night, the exchange appeared across national news, not just on political panels, but during primetime segments. It wasn't the confrontation that caught people's attention. It was the way it happened, measured, intentional. Like Crockett hadn't just won an argument. She had led a lesson. Commentators debated it. Some called it a direct challenge to the establishment. Others dismissed it as showmanship. But for those who truly listened, who took in the full context, it meant something more, clarity. For years, the public had been told the Supreme Court was untouchable. But Crockett had shown calmly, lawfully, that even revered institutions deserve scrutiny. That unchecked power isn't stability, it's decay. And maybe, just maybe, a little discomfort in that room was exactly what justice needed, because the truth is, meaningful change doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it enters quietly through one steady voice. A voice that doesn't waver when power pushes back. And if someone like Jasmine Crockett could sit across from the Chief Justice of the United States and speak with unwavering honesty, then maybe, just maybe, others can too. In their neighborhoods, in their workplaces, in their homes. That's the thing about moments like this. They don't just belong to the people in the room. They belong to all of us. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button. There's more to come in. We're only just beginning.